Hey guys, good morning. It's Evan. It's like June, I think 17th right now. It's a Sunday, and Emily's garden's looking great. This is like the start of the real kickoff of the season. She's been working on it for probably 2 months now, and things are just starting to get in here. Her new Australian raised planter beds. It does a real nice job in here. Anyways, I kind of wanted to ramble a little bit about some interrelated subjects, and that's compost and carbon and nitrogen and wood chips. And so, kind of just walking, giving you a little tour of what's going on here. But if you see, we've started to spread a significant number of wood chips around this property. And basically, the goal was, or is, continuing to be, that there's this back area that's kind of an intermediate zone between the house and the lawn. And then there's this intermediate zone that before we get to the woods. And this is really, I consider, a utility area or work areas. I do a lot of firewood processing back here, a lot of projects back here. This is kind of the back road where Emily brings a lot of stuff through for the garden. So we've been spreading quite a bit of wood chips around with the goal of covering up stumps and rocks, kind of making it more pleasant to walk on, kind of keeping the growth down, and just generally making this area more usable throughout the season. And I've so far spread about 45-50 yards of wood chips. I'm probably going to do at least that much again before we're done. And where this is kind of a big deal, and I'll tell you not to do this lightly, is that what you're doing is you're dropping off massive amounts of carbon into your property. So dried brown wood chips are carbon. You know, if you've ever heard like browns and greens with compost, that's really kind of a layperson's way of thinking about nitrogen, greens, and carbons, browns. So the idea is you want to have some balance, a ratio of nitrogen to carbon that's like 1 part nitrogen to 3 or 4 parts carbon. And there's two reasons why that is. That's just kind of like the right balance to support a fast composting and decomposition. And also nitrogens tend to be pretty wet, and so when you mix them with, and carbons tend to be pretty dry, so when you mix them together like that, you maintain the right balance. So if you had just a pile like grass clippings, which is like the best definition of greens, high carbon, and you just let them sit in a pile and you stir them, that pile is going to smell very ammonic because it doesn't have the right balance of nitrogen and carbon to maintain fast composting, and it's also going to get too wet. So the flip side to that is when you drop a ton of carbon on your property, like you do with wood chips, you're going to be really limiting your composting in the other way. And that's why it does so well at controlling growth and things. But you also have to consider that this is this much carbon put directly on the soil. Some people will argue is going to start fixing nitrogen out of the soil. And my research says that it does that, but to a very short degree. And over the long term, these will break down and amend the soil. But in the, like 5 to 10 year scale, you're probably going to have a slow decomposition, and you're going to be fixing nitrogen out of the soil underneath it to some degree to allow these chips to break down. And so that's very appropriate for here, but I'll also tell you to be careful of adding this much nitrogen, or this much carbon rather, to your property, because it's a significant issue, and you want to understand what it's doing. And so kind of bringing that back into composting, I run basically a very large scale version of the 3-pile system. So, a lot of people will make a 3-pile pallet compost system where they're making 3 different bins. One of them is the building pile. Once that's built, they flip it into the cooking pile in the middle. And then once that one's done cooking, they flip it again into the using pile where it's finished compost. And that's essentially what I have here on a very large scale. These are 18-foot trampoline rings that I put chicken wire around to keep my dog out of it. And this is my building pile. I put everything in here that can be composted. So this is my household compost. This is my yard compost. This is my chicken compost. I even compost cardboard and paper, all my cardboard and paper for just household packaging, as well as all my reptile substrates, because I use quite a bit of that. This would be a building pile over here. This is one that I just started cooking. So this one I'm actively stirring. And you can see this is in the point of active decomposition. This actually has quite a bit of heat kicking off of it right now. I attempted last time I stood at 118 degrees Fahrenheit. So that one is cooking hard. It'll probably take this summer and then into part of next summer at least to finish. And then over here, I've got a finished pile. So this is where people can come and grab to amend soil. This is very much finished compost. It's great. This is the same stuff you'd buy in bags, except it hasn't been screened. So there's like a lot of twigs and things in it, but it's essentially as valuable. So that's just kind of some ramblings about nitrogen and carbon and compost and the 3-pile systems. And I will kind of encourage you not to worry too much, because compost happens no matter what. It happens quickly if you put effort and inputs into it and make sure you're balancing that, but it'll happen slowly regardless. Just have some awareness that there is a balance between these nitrogens and carbons, or browns and greens. Another example of how you can use that to your advantage is in your chicken run. I just took a big scoop of wood chips. If you remember, that's a lot of carbon, and I dumped it into this run, and I'm allowing the birds to kick it all around. And the reason I'm doing that is there's quite a bit of chicken feces in here, which is high in nitrogen. And by putting this carbon in here, I'm helping the balance on the nitrogen and carbon in this run. It's going to help that really break down in a really healthful, hygienic way. So I would just encourage you to have some understanding about that. Don't get too empirical about it, because you don't need to be. But that's a applied science concept that you can use to help yourself on the field. Thanks very much for checking it out. Take care.